Good evening and welcome to this episode of Chew the Cud. I'm John Houston, Director of Business Services with ProTrition Feed. We're happy that you've joined us this evening, and I'm happy to introduce to you our guest, Logan Hickerson. Logan is with the UT-TSU Extension Service working in Rutherford County, and Rutherford County here in Tennessee is right in the middle of the state, Logan, and also the Murfreesboro area. Lots of things to do in Rutherford County from an agricultural standpoint and also from 4-H work. So I know you work primarily with 4-H work, but we certainly want to introduce to our viewing audience that not only are you a livestock person and working with 4-H and working with Extension, but you are very actively involved in the goat business and have been involved both from a commercial standpoint and from a show standpoint in particular. And I've always admired your ability to see the good ones and know what they look like. And so I appreciate you being with us this evening. So let's start right off with the 4-H project in Tennessee. I think I'm partial to the Tennessee 4-H program, obviously coming through that program many years ago. But when I was in 4-H, the GOAT project didn't exist.
Right.
So now that's become a really, really big project and certainly some really nice shows. One in particular coming up, the Hot Meat Goat Classic there in Murfreesboro. So just tell us a little bit about the 4-H GOAT program in and of itself and what that project looks like.
Yeah, so I actually am a product of the 4-H program. I was a longtime member of Rutherford County 4-H, and actually my former agent, Michael Shirley, is who actually got me started into the goats. We did actually some artificial insemination, and that just kind of piqued my interest, and I've just kind of been breeding goats ever since then. So the 4-H GOAT program is one that hadn't been around too long, probably one of the newer programs that we have to offer here in Tennessee, but it's certainly seen a lot of growth. It's a lot easier to keep, a couple of goats at your house when you don't have a lot of land than it would be maybe some of the other animals. So, and we see goats as being a pretty big hobby type animal to keep as well. So it just makes sense to kind of start showing those goats and be in the GOAT project. So like you said, we have a big show coming up here in Murfreesboro at MTSU, that Heart of Tennessee Meat Goat Classic. We'll see probably 250 head of goats there and, probably 70 to 80 exhibitors. I know our state 4-H show is growing every year. Being at the state fair, we have a lot of exhibitors across the state from even all of our eastern region all the way to the western region and then also just quite a bit here in Middle Tennessee. So you go to a county fair now, you're liable to see pretty good numbers at some of these goat shows.
Absolutely. It's been real surprising to me, coming years ago, not having that project and the way the animal has actually developed over the years as well. Right. and is amazing. So tell us just a little bit. You've got a 4-H'er that wants to start in the GOAT project. How would they go about becoming enrolled, if you will, and starting, and what do they look for in their goats, and how would they go about that?
Right. So probably the best way would just be to be tied into either if you have maybe a livestock club in your county, maybe if you're in agriculture classes, talk with your advisors and agents. They'll help you kind of get started. There are certainly some deadlines that we have to meet for getting those animals tagged, but making sure that you just have a place to keep them is important. So, just for a couple of goats for showing, if you just had like a 8x8 stall out in the backyard or something would be sufficient for the length of the project that you're going to keep those goats. But then, obviously picking out a good goat, there's a lot of good breeders around here, local to Middle Tennessee and in both of the eastern and western region as well. So access to goats and show quality goats is probably as easy as it has ever been. One of the first goats I ever got, we went to David Gordon's and looked through his kill pen and found a goat that actually won a class at the state fair when it used to be back at the old state fairgrounds. So finding goats is a lot easier now. Like I said, very easy to keep them at the house. So really just a good project. And then getting those deadlines, we certainly want to make sure they're tagged if you're wanting to show them at the regional and state level as far as 4-H shows go. And then, there's certainly all these county fairs you can go to. There's a lot of opportunity to get those animals out and get them shown and have fun with them.
And that's what it's all about, is developing youth as
Right.
well as teaching the responsibility to caring for animals and that type of thing. But as you think about the goat project, what breeds are the most common, or breed crosses even, that are
Right.
the most common that we see 4-Hers exhibiting in our project?
Yeah, so I would say probably 98% of the goats are going to be pretty much full-blood boar goats. They may be commercial or registered. We have registered divisions at most of our shows, but most of your show meat goats are going to go back to that boar influence. You might see a little bit of Nubian in there. They're going to match kind of the same size and scale, add maybe more of a feminine look to those animals, and certainly as they get older, they're good producers. But it's all going to really come back to the boar. Now, the boar is not just the the white body and red head like it used to be. You'll certainly see the colored ones, the spotted, dapples, paints, and that kind of stuff at a lot of these shows, and especially here in the Southeast. Those are kind of becoming the more popular type of boar goat that you would see at some of these shows.
So they must be very popular because, as you well know, me and my son both are auctioneers, and my son worked a sale up in Cookeville this past weekend, and as he was ringing that sale, one of the dapple goat brings $43,000.
Yeah,
so
that's
they're
right.
certainly very, very popular, and they're really being bred, that meat quality and that massive structure that these goats can exhibit is really eye appealing. So as we think about the breeds and all of the things that are involved, let's move, Logan, if you will, to just a general production. Goats, one of the things we see as a problem with goats is worms.
Right.
And how do you, what program do you use? Not specifically product specifically, but how do you go about ensuring that you're not getting resistance and that you've got a good program in place?
Right. So we kind of go about it in two ways, really. Our show goats kind of get a different treatment than kind of our herd goats, our brood does do. So I'll start with our brood does. We keep those on pasture most of the time, other than when they are up in the lambing or the kidding pens. Once they have kidded, we will rotate the pasture on those animals. We typically bring our cows in right behind our goats on the pasture, and we've seen that for some reason just helps a lot, keeping those parasite loads down in those pastures we're utilizing. Our show goats are kind of a different story. We do some dry lotting with those. We keep them up in stalls and show pens under fans and stuff, so they're not as disposed to those parasites as some of our brood does and herd animals would be. So we don't have to deworm as much with our show goats because they are up in the pen and we're giving them the feed and they're not going out and foraging. Our herd does, we kind of use the FAMACHA system for deworming on those. We found that we don't want to build up resistance to any of the dewormers, so we're not just going to kind of go across the board and deworm everything twice a year or whatever it is. So we kind of check on an as-needed basis. Really around that kidding time, we're checking. When we're getting ready to breed them, we're really checking there as well. Just making sure that that eye color is good. That's really going to depend on the worm load there. So the pinker they are, the more confident we are that they don't have a huge worm load, and so we're not going to worry about putting any dewormer in them. That way, we're not building up that resistance with that individual animal. And I've found, with my herd, we try to keep it pretty closed off in terms of bringing in a lot of outside animals, and that has helped a lot as well. Quarantining those new animals that we are bringing in kind of keeps our pastures as clean as we possibly can.
Okay, so from a production standpoint as well, what about feet, and how do you go about taking care of your goats' feet?
Yeah, so that certainly is a challenge for us. Our show goats is one thing. We're trimming those pretty much anytime we get them up on the stand because we're trying to keep those feet in as good condition. But when we're running 25 or 30 brood does, it's hard to give them the attention that they need. We do try to keep rock around all of our feeding areas where we're feeding them their grain or their hay. Right outside of their shelters, we try to keep rock there as well. That seems to help kind of sand those hooves down. But we also still run into some hoof rot and hoof scald issues. Southeast is kind of a wet, dry, humid, dry. It just kind of bounces around. So The weather certainly doesn't help us here in terms of the feet not getting too overgrown, but we're probably having to trim hooves every 2 months at least, and they probably need it more than that. But with a busy schedule, I mean, it's hard to give them the treatment they need as far as the hooves go.
It is, and being a sheep producer, we run into the same
Right.
thing with the sheep. But so let's go back to the show ring. I meant to ask this question a while ago, and it slipped my mind, and now I'm going to ask it.
Yeah.
So as a judge, you're a judge, and I know you've judged shows.
Right.
And
Yes, sir.
And what are you looking for with a goat when you're in the show ring?
Yep. So, I mean, I think with our market animals, I mean, we're looking for just about as much muscle as we can put on those animals. We want them to still be able to move around. We don't want them to be too restricted, but we need to see some width down their top. We need to see some of that muscle along the loin and the rack area. And then as much as we can get into that rear quarter is also, going to be pretty desirable. I'm really a stickler on my does, though. I need to see them move around the ring really well. I mean, for them to last in my herd, they got to be able to, hold up to all these conditions, not having their feet trimmed every time that they need it, and still be able to have babies and milk. So the structure is very important. Feet and legs are going to be very important on does. And then I need to see a little bit of style to them. I mean, I need to enjoy what I'm looking at when I go out to feed. And so that's the kind that I'm going to pick when I'm in the show ring, is ones that have an attractive look to them, kind of have some balance from the side when we look at them as well. And then if we can put some of that muscle and thickness in them, I mean, that's always going to be a plus as well.
So can you tell me from a production standpoint, even, this is really important in the show side of things as well, in particular with females, but the way we put females in classes and based on age and things like that. So talk a little bit about age, how we determine age, in particular with teeth and that kind of thing, because that becomes very important. Even if we're selecting commercial animals, to know how old they are, but also it's really important when we get into that show ring, because sometimes we may think, well, we've got an animal that's this age, and then we look at those teeth and they really need to be in another class or whatever.
Yeah. So I mean, we always are looking at the teeth on these does and even the wethers when we're at shows, just to make sure that they're hitting the right age bracket. That way we don't have a super mature animal. It might be a little bit lighter in terms of weight. So we don't want them to be in the same class as some of our kid animals that are still immature. So typically all of your kid animals are going to keep their baby teeth until they're around a year old. Now that's going to depend on diet, and if they're chewing on bark on a tree, they might chip a tooth out a little bit earlier than they would if they were just eating grain or forage. So we have to take that into consideration. But around a year old is when they'll start getting their first adult teeth. Then every year until about 4 or 5 years old, they'll keep putting in, pairs of adult teeth after that. And so in our 4-H and FFA shows, they can't be over 2 years old. So they can't have more than 2 sets of adult teeth. So 4 total adult teeth. If they have the 5th one, we would move them to an age doe class in our shows. But this also is important for just a commercial person. When you're going and buying animals off of someone's farm, they may not have, exact records. So you could certainly just grab a hold of them, look at those teeth. And if those, teeth are really worn down, you've got a pretty, old animal. But if you just see, 2 sets of adult teeth, you still have an animal with a lot of life ahead of it.
Yeah. So in the show ring, when you set your classes, then we have similar animals in the same class by utilizing that same age, same, and that makes everything a little more fair.
Makes it easier on the judge. I mean, when animals are coming in at the same weight and same age, kind of where they're at in their life, and you can kind of either project where they're going to go if they're younger goats, or if they are supposed to be in production, we can judge them based on where they're at in their production life as well.
So when you talk about marketing, let's just go to the commercial side of things, and we're not looking at the show ring. None of the animals they're going to go to some graded sale, or they're going to market them off the farm or whatever. What size is most marketable for those kids? what are we trying to get to?
Yeah, so I would say probably the most desirable size is around that 45 to 65 pound range is where we see typically the highest premium when we're taking these to sell. Just because, we can still put them on feed and get them, a little bit heavier. They're younger animals typically to be at that age. So, going to be a little bit healthier. Don't have to worry about them being old. And then, you can also take a 45 to 60 pound goat and still, have that one for dinner that night too. So it's got enough meat on it at that age. A lot of producers like to send them to the market at that age because that weight, is about the size that they would wean those animals at. And so you don't have to put a lot of extra cost in feeding them up to another weight. So it's a good thing that the market kind of accepts those that are kind of right at weaning, to where the producers not putting a lot more money into them as well.
So on the show side of things, marketing becomes a little different,
right?
And there's certainly registered sales, and talk a little bit about maybe some of the sales, but also some where our registered breeders, kind of how they market, maybe with social media and websites.
Yep. So social media, just like anything, is probably the best way to market what you're doing. I personally, I like to get pictures of kids and youth that are showing our animals, that have the ribbon backdrop pictures are certainly good to push out on social media to draw just constant interest. But then also when you have animals for sale, you need to be pushing those animals, pictures of them out there, sire and dam. Those pictures are also important to see, what you can project that animal to become. We here in Middle Tennessee and Tennessee in general have a lot of great breeders, but also a lot of great sales that have come to this area. And so that really helps people around here find those quality animals. Like you spoke about earlier, there was a sale in Cookeville that did really well this past weekend. There's probably 7 or 8 registered sales that are selling over 100 head of goats each time they get together that are really top quality. I like to sell mine on online platforms. There's certainly a bunch to choose from there. I feel like we can reach out to a broader audience and get more customers from a variety of areas. Me and a partner of mine sold some animals to California last year, and being able to push those out on social media and online sales platforms is what has helped us do that. And just a little small herd here in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, has been able to reach out to the California State Fair and have some goats do well out there. So that's certainly one thing that I like about online sales platforms, and then pushing those animals out on social media.
Well, let's shift gears, and I want to just mention from the goat production standpoint, we do have a few and growing, I think, goat dairies in our state. And in particular in the territory where ProTrition Feed would market. I know of some here, not too far from here,
right.
That are really good ones. And so do you see that growing? Our dairy industry from a cow standpoint in our trade area has declined, but how do you see the dairy goat business?
Yeah, so I think that it is certainly growing. There's a lot of interest in that. I actually went earlier this spring and bought a dairy doe from a local breeder because I had a couple of bottle kids that I just honestly didn't want to have to fool with the bottle on them, and so I got that dairy doe for them. But I know when we have our state 4-H show at the state fair, they probably have 300 or so dairy goats that come in right after us, and seeing that many goats, that many dairy goats, is certainly impressive. And I know with my time in extension, I've been able to go around and tour some of these goat dairies, and it just seems like it's a pretty sustainable. We're not only just marketing the milk with those, the soaps and those kind of things are also a pretty key thing that have come along as far as a lot of people wanting to use those products as well. So we actually are kind of in maybe some early talks about adding a 4-H dairy goat show in. So we'll see maybe where that goes, but I think there's certainly interest in it. And if it's come up to us in the 4-H way as it has maybe around here, then I think we're going to see an increased interest and more producers getting into those dairy goats because they're a little bit smaller, a little bit easier to manage, but you still have that dairy feel that a lot of us remember from our youth and things like that.
Right. And, I think we've been very fortunate, and I mentioned this on other videos as well, but we've been very fortunate in Tennessee agriculture, and I know ProTrition is broadened outside of Tennessee, and we're certainly proud of that. But in Tennessee agriculture, we're tight knit.
Right.
So all of the groups, everyone knows everyone else, and so you talk about the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, the Extension Service, the co-op, Tennessee Farm Bureau. All of these groups are really working together to enhance all of agriculture,
Yeah.
whether it be the row crops, whether it be wineries, whether it be whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But everybody has that goal to really promote and foster the growth of agriculture. And I certainly appreciate being in Tennessee to see that happen. But having said that, and talking about the dairy goat side of things and how it's kind of expanded over the years, I think we have to thank the Tennessee Department of Agriculture and those responsible for creating the Agriculture Enhancement Program.
Yeah, certainly.
Not only just dairy goat side of things, but all of agriculture, in particular livestock owners and livestock agriculture. But certainly would be amiss if we didn't mention that program has allowed some of these, what I would call atypical types of agriculture to come into existence, and dairy goats would be one of those. And not only dairy goats, but also on the meat side as well. But we're seeing, our goat populations expand and our sheep populations, and I think that is one thing that's helped enhance that. And not only that, but it's the education side of a move and focus from, the extension side of things, providing a lot of education to help, non-livestock people become livestock people. So we certainly can appreciate that. Well, Logan, as we end up here, is there any final thoughts that you might have from a goat production standpoint that our audience might be interested in that we've missed?
Well, just support the local youth that are involved in the goat project. I mean, that's one thing as a 4-H agent. I appreciate all the breeders around, the feed dealers, the show supply people. I mean, everybody that comes together for the youth and just makes this goat project one of the, faster growing ones. It's fairly new, but it certainly has come a long way, and so I'm a product of it, so I really appreciate the effort that everybody puts into the GOAT program.
Well, absolutely. And Logan, we thank you so much for your time in recording this video.
Yeah, thank you.
I know it's taken time out of your day to do that, but we really appreciate that. We look forward to great success at the Heart of Tennessee Meat Goat Classic. I know you serve an active role on that committee that puts that show on, and we appreciate that as well, and look forward to increased success in the 4-H Goat Project and just our goat business in general. And I would say to our audience, if you have any further questions about goat production, goat products, see the folks at your local farmers co-op. Thank you.